I used to think I understood quiet. The kind that fills a house when everyone's asleep, or when the wind presses against the windows but doesn't quite break through. But lately, the quiet feels different, heavier. It started the night my husband's cousin came back to town. And somehow, it ended with my sister's husband sitting in my kitchen at 2 in the morning, asking me questions I still don't know how to answer. Maybe I should start from the beginning. My name's Mara. I'm 46, and for most of my life, I've been the kind of woman who plays it safe. Polite smiles, careful choices, no unnecessary mess. My husband, Daniel, is decent, stable, predictable. We've been married long enough to speak mostly in looks and half-finished sentences. It's not unhappiness exactly, more like a slow fading of color. Then, in late September, Eli showed up. Daniel's cousin. Younger, maybe 27. The kind of person who walks into a room like he's never learned to lower his voice or his eyes. He said he was just passing through after a job ended early, that he needed somewhere to stay for a week. I told myself it was fine. Family, right? Except it wasn't just him. That same week, my sister's husband, Mark, came around too. He and Daniel were planning some renovation project for the house, and they needed my input on the design. That's how it began. Two men, both connected to my family in ways that should have kept things simple. Only, things didn't stay simple. Eli was the kind of person who noticed things. How I stirred my coffee twice before drinking it. How I never finished a story once I started it. He'd ask questions no one else bothered with. Small things like, "Do you ever miss who you were before all this?" I laughed it off. I shouldn't have. Mark, on the other hand, was quieter, but with that stillness that makes you feel watched. He'd show up to help around the house even when Daniel wasn't home. Once, I caught him in the backyard, just standing there, staring at the sea behind our property. When I asked if he was okay, he said, "Sometimes I just need to remember what distance feels like." I didn't understand what he meant until later. At first, it was nothing more than awkward dinners and shared coffee breaks, the kind of moments you forget by morning. But slowly, things began to overlap. Conversations crossed lines they shouldn't. One night, after Daniel had gone to bed, Eli and Mark were both in the kitchen, talking too quietly for me to hear. When I stepped in, they stopped. Eli looked at me and said, "We were just talking about you." I tried to laugh, but my voice wouldn't come out. Mark didn't look away, and that's when I realized, whatever they'd brought into this house, it wasn't just conversation. I didn't sleep that night. Even after Eli and Mark went quiet, I could hear the hum of their voices under my door, low and steady, like a current running beneath the floorboards. Daniel snored softly beside me, completely unaware that something in our house had shifted. It wasn't anything obvious. No shouting, no secret letters, just a tension that hadn't been there before. By morning, everything looked normal again. The smell of coffee, the clink of cups, Daniel scrolling through his phone while Mark measured something near the porch. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something I wasn't supposed to hear, or maybe something I wasn't supposed to know yet. Eli acted like nothing had happened. He smiled easily, moved around the kitchen like he'd lived here forever. When he asked if I needed help setting the table, I said no. He did it anyway. He always did. He wasn't much like Daniel. Where Daniel's quiet came from control, Eli's came from thought, like he was always studying the room, waiting for it to show him a secret. He'd ask things like, "Do you ever feel like you're watching your own life happen from the outside?" And somehow make it sound like small talk. Mark was different too. My sister, Lila, used to joke that he was the kind of man who felt everything too deeply but never said a word. Lately, I could see what she meant. He'd grown distant, polite, but distracted, like something was pulling him away. Sometimes he'd ask me about Daniel, about how we managed to keep things steady. His tone always carried a question underneath that I couldn't quite name. The three of them started spending more time together. Long drives for supplies. Late-night discussions about plans that never quite added up. When I asked Daniel what they were working on, he brushed it off, said it was nothing, just family stuff. But it didn't feel like nothing. One evening, after they'd gone out, I found Eli's notebook left open on the kitchen counter. Pages filled with sketches of the house, the backyard, and something that looked like the coastline drawn in heavy pencil. Next to one of the sketches, a note in small handwriting read, "It starts here." I didn't know what that meant, but when I heard a car pull into the driveway, I shut the notebook fast. Eli came in first, saw me standing there, and froze just long enough for it to mean something. He smiled after that, the easy kind, practiced, but his eyes didn't match it. And for the first time, I wondered if whatever was happening here had been planned long before I noticed. It's strange how quickly normal can start to feel wrong. For a while, I tried to convince myself that everything was fine, that the late nights, the quiet conversations, and the lingering glances were all in my head. But there's only so long you can ignore what keeps repeating. A week after I found Eli's notebook, Mark stopped showing up at the house altogether. Daniel said he'd gone back to finish a job across town, but Lila called me that same night, confused. She hadn't heard from him in days. When I asked Daniel again, he brushed it off. He's fine, Mara. Don't start worrying about things that don't concern you. But that's what bothered me. Since when didn't they concern me? Eli started spending more time in the garage, alone. He said he was helping Daniel with the renovation plans, but every time I passed by, I'd hear typing instead of tools. Once, when he didn't realize I was there, I saw him delete a message from his phone the moment he read it. His hand trembled before he slipped the phone into his pocket. I thought about asking him what was going on. I almost did, but the way he looked at me lately made it hard to speak. It wasn't threatening, just intense. Like he wanted me to understand something he couldn't say aloud. One afternoon, I finally asked, "What are you and Daniel really working on?" He hesitated, just long enough for the truth to flicker behind his eyes. Then, softly, he said, "You'll see soon." That night, the wind picked up from the coast. The shutters rattled, and I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Mark, about the notebook, about Eli's calm voice saying those words, "You'll see soon." By morning, I found something on the porch, a small, folded piece of paper tucked beneath a stone. My name was written on it. Inside, just one line, "Ask Daniel about the land behind the house." I stared at it for a long time before hiding it in the drawer under the sink. Later that day, Daniel acted normal, too normal. He talked about dinner plans, weather, the same as always. But when I mentioned the backyard, just casually, his hand froze halfway to his coffee cup. A small tremor, barely visible, but real. I didn't press him then. I just smiled, nodded, and kept pretending. But something in me knew, whatever they were keeping from me had already begun. For days, I couldn't stop thinking about that note. The words "Ask Daniel about the land behind the house" stayed in my head, repeating like a hum I couldn't turn off. Every time I looked out the kitchen window, toward the overgrown stretch of trees behind our backyard, I felt that same pull, curiosity tangled with dread. Eli and Daniel had started spending more time out there. I'd see them carrying boxes, talking in low voices. Sometimes, when the wind shifted, I'd catch bits of conversation I couldn't quite piece together. Numbers, names, something about a transfer. One afternoon, I finally followed them. Not all the way, just far enough to see where they stopped. There was an old shed tucked near the edge of the woods, half hidden by vines. I'd barely noticed it before. Daniel stood with his back to me, Eli beside him, both looking down at something on the ground. I couldn't see what it was, but whatever it was, it held them still for a long time. When they turned back toward the house, I slipped behind the trees. My heart was pounding so hard it drowned out everything else. That night, dinner was quiet. Too quiet. Daniel barely spoke. Eli kept his eyes on his plate. When I asked about the project, Daniel said, "Almost done." His voice had a sharp edge I'd never heard before. I wanted to ask more, but Eli gave me a look, just a flicker of warning, and I stayed silent. Later, when Daniel went to shower, I knocked softly on Eli's door. He didn't answer right away. When he finally opened it, his eyes looked tired, and his voice came out low. "You shouldn't have followed us," he said. "I didn't," I started, but he shook his head. "Mara, please," he said, softer now. "Just trust me. It's better if you don't know everything yet." Something in the way he said it made my throat tighten. "You sound like Mark," I whispered. Eli froze. "What do you mean?" He said something similar before he disappeared. For the first time, Eli looked afraid. Not for himself, but for me. "Then you really shouldn't have found that note." The sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. Daniel's voice, calm, too calm, called from the kitchen. "Mara, could you come here for a second?" Eli's hand brushed against mine, brief but deliberate. "Don't tell him we talked," he whispered. And just like that, the quiet of our house didn't feel like silence anymore. It felt like warning. When I walked into the kitchen, Daniel was standing by the sink, his sleeves rolled up, water running though he wasn't washing anything. The sound filled the room like background noise for something unsaid. He didn't turn around right away. "You've been quiet lately," he said, almost casually. "I've been tired," I replied, keeping my voice even. He finally faced me, drying his hands slowly. "Tired or distracted?" I froze. For a moment, the only sound was the dripping tap. His expression was calm, but his eyes were searching, like he already knew I'd been watching. "What's going on, Daniel?" I asked. "What's really happening out there?" He let out a short laugh, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "You've been talking to Eli, haven't you?" That name, the way he said it, sharp, defensive, it told me enough. Before I could answer, Eli appeared in the doorway. His tone was neutral, but his posture was tight, shoulders slightly turned as if ready to step between us. "Daniel, don't," he said. "Don't what?" Daniel's voice rose, steady but cold. "She's my wife. I have every right to know what she's been told." Eli's jaw tightened. "You're making this worse." "Then tell her," Daniel snapped. "Tell her why you're really here." The room went still. I looked between them, two men bound by family, but standing like strangers now. Eli's voice was quiet when he finally spoke. "I came because Mark asked me to." That name hit the air like a spark. "Mark," I said, almost a whisper. "But he's gone." Eli nodded slowly. "Before he disappeared, he found something. Something Daniel didn't want anyone else to see." Daniel slammed his hand against the counter. "That's enough." "No," Eli said firmly. "She deserves to know." My heartbeat thudded in my ears. "Know what?" Eli reached into his jacket pocket and placed a folded document on the counter. The paper was creased, worn from being hidden. I opened it, my hands trembling. It wasn't just a map, it was a deed. The land behind the house wasn't ours. It belonged to someone else. Someone who'd been trying to reclaim it for years. "Daniel's been keeping it quiet," Eli said softly. "He made a deal that went bad. Mark found out, and he tried to fix it." Daniel's face had gone pale. "You don't know what you're talking about." Eli didn't look away. "Then tell her where Mark is." For a moment, I thought Daniel might. His mouth opened, then closed again. The silence that followed was unbearable. Then he said something I didn't expect. "You really think you can protect her from what's already coming?" The wind rattled the windows just then, almost on cue. Eli moved closer, his hand barely brushing mine under the table, a wordless signal to stay quiet. Because whatever truth Daniel was holding back, it wasn't over yet. The next morning, the house felt different, quiet, but not calm. A storm had rolled in overnight, and the wind pressed against the windows like it wanted to get inside. Daniel was already up, pacing the living room with a phone in his hand. Eli sat at the table, staring out the window. Neither spoke. The tension between them was thick enough to feel. I wanted to believe there was a simple explanation, that all of this was some misunderstanding about paperwork or property or family business. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Finally, I said it. "Where is Mark?" Daniel stopped pacing. He didn't answer right away. The clock ticked loud in the silence. Eli looked at him, steady. "Tell her." Daniel exhaled, eyes unfocused. He was supposed to walk away. That was the deal. "What deal?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. He turned to me. "The land behind the house. It wasn't just a piece of property. There's money tied to it, old investments. I was trying to fix things, Mara. But Mark found out I'd borrowed against it." Eli's chair scraped back. "You didn't just borrow. You lied." Daniel's tone hardened. "I did what I had to do to keep this house, this family." "Then why is Mark missing?" I asked. My hands were cold. Daniel looked down, then back at me. "He went to confront the buyers. I told him not to. He didn't listen." Eli stood. "So you let him go alone?" "He said he'd handle it." Daniel's voice broke for the first time. "When he didn't come back, I thought maybe." He stopped, swallowed hard. I realized then that the fear in his eyes wasn't guilt, it was regret. He truly didn't know what had happened. Eli stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Mark reached out to me before that night. He sent me proof of the deal. That's why I came. I thought if I found out where he went, I could help him and warn you." Before I could speak, a car door slammed outside. All three of us froze. Through the rain-blurred window, a figure approached the porch, hooded, slow, carrying something wrapped in plastic. Eli moved first, stepping toward the door. "Stay here," he said quietly. Daniel whispered, "It can't be," but didn't finish. The front door opened with a creak. A voice, rough and tired, filled the air. "Is anyone going to invite me in?" It was Mark. Water dripped from his sleeves as he looked at each of us. Eli, Daniel, then me. and set the bundle on the table. Inside, damp but intact, was the rest of the deed. The missing pages. He smiled faintly. Thought you'd want to see how this ends. No one spoke for a long time. The only sound was the rain sliding off the roof and Mark's steady breathing. He looked thinner than I remembered, pale, hollow-eyed, but standing. Daniel was the first to move. He stepped forward, his voice shaking. Where have you been? Mark gave a faint, tired smile. Trying to fix the mess you made. He explained everything in pieces, the way someone does when the truth is too heavy to carry all at once. The buyers Daniel had borrowed from weren't the kind of people who waited patiently. When Mark discovered what Daniel had done, he went to confront them, hoping to protect our family before things got worse. They hadn't heard him, but they'd made a deal, one that required proof the land wasn't worth what Daniel claimed. That's why he'd disappeared, hiding until he could gather the documents and get clear. Eli sat down slowly, rubbing his face. You should have told us, he said. Mark shrugged. I didn't trust anyone to keep it quiet. Daniel sank into a chair. His face looked older somehow, the kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep. I just wanted to keep the house. I didn't think it would go this far. The storm outside began to fade, leaving behind that still, wet silence that comes after a long night. I watched the three of them, men tied to each other through family, through secrets, through mistakes. It struck me how much damage silence can do when it lingers too long. Eli looked up at me. You're the only one who tried to see what was really happening, he said quietly. You kept asking. I didn't answer. I just picked up the papers Mark had brought and placed them on the table between us. Then let's stop hiding, I said. Let's fix this the right way. Daniel nodded, eyes down. I'll make it right. No more secrets. We spent the rest of the day sorting through the paperwork, calling the right people, beginning to untangle what had been done. It wasn't simple, and it wouldn't be quick, but it was honest. When the house finally went quiet again that night, I stood by the window, watching the sea. The storm clouds were breaking, and a thin streak of light was starting to show through. Eli walked past on his way out, stopping for just a moment. You'll be okay now, he said softly. I smiled. Maybe not okay, I said. But better. He nodded, then stepped out into the cool air. The house was still, but not heavy anymore. Just quiet, the real kind this time. The kind that comes after the truth finally has a place to rest.